So anyway, I got word late Sunday night that we needed someone to pinch hit. And since I just mentioned to Adam Pinsky, our new programs director, a week ago that I was willing to do so, he took me up on the offer. So this is a different presentation from what I gave to you a few months ago. It's focused more on what to do once you've been hacked. And I think that's a really important question right now because everyone is concerned about, oh, prevent being hacked. We've got our firewall, we've got our antivirus, and they're going to get through, you guys. And so this is a different perspective on that. I think you'll enjoy it. But first, before we start, how many people have gotten hacked in the room? We'll admit it. Okay. How many people have an associate who knows that who they know have been hacked? Okay. And then here's the big question. How many people have opened second accounts on Facebook because their first one got hacked or wasn't able to open anymore? Okay, that last one was curious of Mike Hill, so thanks, Mike. In any case, before we get started, I just want to have a commercial out for an organization called Bellevue Rotary, and we always say yes. We're here to help, we're here to serve, and we always say yes. So I just want to share that with you. And what's going on today? So when you really look at what's happening, this is a kind of older type statistic that I found, but it says 90% of the companies have been hacked. In 2011, that's 10 years ago. And you start looking at it and say, oh my God, what's going on, right? Everyone's been hacked. Well, why, or what did they get, or what did they do, right? And it's all about the money. It's all about the money. And last time I shared you the different types of criminals that do something like this, and yes, they're nefarious, and yes, they're from other countries, and yes, they're organizations, and not just someone out in their garage doing this for fun. It's really organizations that are doing this, and that's why it's so prolific. And there's some numbers now that are sharing that we're expected this year. The money lost, things like ransomware, is in the trillions. Trillions. So it's not a fun it's never been fun, right? I don't know anyone who says, yes, I'm glad I was hacked. But at the same time, it's very, very prolific, and it's something that we need to be concerned with. But my goal today is not to scare you with all this doom and gloom and many more statistics. That's the only number I'm going to share with you. So what do they do? What does someone do when they get hacked? If someone gets ransomware and all of their servers, all of their machines are frozen, what do? They panic. They say, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I got to pay the ransom. And they pay the ransom. And then what happens? Sometimes the bad guys come back and say, okay, thank you. Give me more money. Here's some of your data. And this has happened before for hospitals, for police departments in maybe Akron, Ohio, somewhere in the Midwest. I mean, it's just crazy, right? So you look at this stuff and you say, well, what can I really do about this? How can I prevent this? How can I stop this? And what strategies do I have? And we'll talk about some of those strategies a little bit later on. But before we do that, I want to kind of discuss a few different pieces of somewhat controversial type information. So the first one is cybersecurity is often not about technology. And people look at this and they look at me and say, what are you talking about? It's all technology, it's all IT. I just hand this over to my IT company, I hand this to my IT guy, I hand this to whoever handles technology, and they'll take care of it, right? And I say, you're missing the point. The point is this is a business issue. It's about money. It's about access. It's not just a matter of your data is exposed, and we'll talk about different ways to prevent that. But who has access to that data? How are they getting their hands on this data? And what are they going to do with it? So it's not just the fact that your data is at risk and is it protected, but how are people accessing that data, and can you prevent the bad guys from getting in? Case in point, so it's not Garrett, but there's other health companies that I work with, and they say, well, my data is all protected. It's all in the cloud through this application that we got. and we don't control that application, so we're safe, right? And it's like, well, who else can log in? Have you protected your passwords? Have you protected that so that so the bad guys are unable to get through that? That's really the key question. The second point here is there's no such thing as privacy. And this is controversial because people are like, well, of course I have my own privacy and I can keep everything off. Even if you're keeping yourself offline, right? I mean, the healthcare has been hacked. Credit companies have been hacked. The information is out there. And to say that, well, I've got our stuff private now, it's not the case. I'm sorry. People don't want to hear this, but I'm not here to tell you just everything's honky-dory. That's the facts here, and that's the challenge. And then the third statement is this isn't a place to do it yourself. That doesn't mean you have to use above cloud, but you have to use someone who's focused on this. IT companies come back and they say, well, we're taking care of this for you, but they have their own goals in mind, not necessarily yours from a security standpoint. So just be careful and be aware. And some of these points I'm going to make in the next slide, we'll point that out. So what do you need to do? The first thing you need to do is have a plan. And I don't care if that plan is 3 steps. Call your you've been hacked, right? What do? Call your cybersecurity lawyer. Call your cyber insurance company and bring in an IT forensics team. But what happens when you call in that forensics team? They're going to ask for a retainer of 50 to 100K. And maybe that's not a lot for your business. People have lots of things going on. But that's still a big chunk of change to automatically just say, okay, here you go, right out the door. And who knows, that retainer is going to be enough, right? But they won't even start from a forensic standpoint until they have that money cash in hand. So you just need to be aware of that and say, how am I going to prevent this? Second thing, have a plan for ransomware. If you get hit with ransomware, as I mentioned before, what are you going to do about it? You're going to decide on the cuff when it happens? In a moment of panic, say, oh, I'm just going to just pay the ransom? Or you're going to think ahead of time, say, what are we going to do just judiciously if this happens, and make a decision based on your business and your exposure, instead of saying, well, we're just going to pay the ransom at the end when it's too late to do anything else. So think about those things proactively and understand and consider what your approach is going to be. I have this first bullet up here, tabletop exercise. How many people have heard about tabletop exercise? Anyone? Cool. Okay. So it's basically a walkthrough, right? Who does what, when you have what I'm calling a cybersecurity disaster. Who's going to do what? Who's responsible? If that person is not available, what are they going to do? What are the actions you're going to take? How are you going to deal with this situation? And that's not IT. That's the brand. That's your reputation. That's how you're going to deal with things in case of emergency, in case of disaster. Only is cybersecurity instead of some other type of disaster you're thinking of. Every business is different. Understanding where your vulnerabilities are, or having a company come in and help determine that is really key, because your vulnerabilities are different from someone else's, even if you're in the same industry. Isolation is one of my favorite words. Isolation from the standpoint of isolate your network, isolate your data, isolate your database, but also isolate access. Who has access to that data? Don't just think of IT terms saying, okay, this is all the IT infrastructure. We can protect each individual piece. Protect who can get into that infrastructure, who can access it, who can figure out how to get and use that or misuse that data. That's really key from a standpoint of your standpoint, from a business standpoint. Backup and disaster recovery has been talked about over and over. It's okay to have backups. That's great. But are they based off of your production systems? Because the bad guys can get into your production systems and it's connected to your backups, well, they can get into there. And they can do all kinds of bad things. What they do, they can infect ransomware in your backups, and now you can't restore, and they got you over a barrel. So really think about this from a standpoint of how should this work? How do we want to do it? I mean, best practices, I'll say you need 3 backups. 1, your production, so you can restore quickly. 1 offline, so that in case of this ransomware type thing or another type of hack, you can restore from that and it's clean. And then the third piece might be in the cloud somewhere, right? Just as another backup. So those are just some initial best practices that can help you from a standpoint of backup. And then finally, from a backup disaster recovery, please test your disaster recovery process. Nobody does this anymore. Jeffrey's nodding his head like a banshee saying, yeah, I get that one. People don't do this. They don't test it. They say, here's my disaster recovery process. Have you ever tested it? No. I have to bring down everything if I test it. Well, think about this. The bad guys are doing, bad guys have to be right once. And they're hitting you maybe 100,000 times an hour, a minute. That's sobering news to you guys, because we see this all the time. And my goal as a Rotarian is to say, how can we make this better for everyone and not just all this gloom and doom, and some basic, fundamental, simple steps to take that can help you. So, and the last one, technology and automation. Did you guys know that there is a company that provides endpoint protection, which is like the old Symantec or Kaspersky, right? The type of software you put in your machines and protect them from being hacked. Well, there's one company that does that, and they have a warranty. Now, I'm not saying that just because they have a warranty, they're better than everyone else. Well, at least they have that warranty, and it goes up to $1 million, right? So if you get ransomware on their watch, they'll pay the ransom. Okay, maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's small money, I don't know. But just having knowledge about some of the automation that they take, and taking something like that and rolling back and how they do all this technology can be an advantage to you if you know how to get access to these and able to implement that. So that's just another step or discussion about technology that's important. I'll volunteer again. I think about 5 of you took me up on an offer last time. I offer a free newsletter. If you want to learn more, if you want to do this, just shoot me an email, put in the subject line newsletter, and I'll make sure you get this. No cost to you guys. I do have this as a subscription for my my customers, but for you guys, it's free, of course. So, and that's it. Any questions? Yes. Yes.
You mentioned that the bad guys could be attacking you, 100,000 times an hour, a minute, or whatnot. Can you just briefly, if it's possible to briefly elaborate, like how is that happening? I'm envisioning that they have their own software programs that can test, 100,000 passwords a second or that kind of thing. Just to elaborate on why it's important to either have a super complicated password or use a password generator.
Sure, yeah. So a couple of things there. So they use something called bots, and bots automate this process. So no one's typing on a keyboard and banging that across. That's the first thing. No one has a keyboard, but there's a way of making that happen many times per second, right? So they're just invoking that and trying different ways of getting in. Hacking a password, as you mentioned, could be processed using brute force, in which they try every character that they have access to in your password. That's a simple fix that if, something like Microsoft Outlook or Gmail, if you're using two-factor authentication, that helps protect you a little bit. Definitely would recommend that. And then if you have your own website and your own passwords, make sure people can't put in unlimited number of tries before they get locked out. That will help with that. So those are a couple of things. And passwords themselves, it used to be, so there's best practices around password. I believe the latest that NIST has authors is 12 characters or more is the recommendation. And the reason is just the length, right? So they're trying every single character until they get to 12. So the longer your password is, easier. And each character can be anything, right? And the whole thing about, yes, you have to put like a $sign, a capital letter, and a lowercase, that really doesn't matter anymore. It's just the length. So having some type of a phrase that's unusual. Like at one time I used purple gyoza, because gyoza is dumplings, right? And purple is, I don't know any purple colored gyoza at all. So just something that doesn't make sense and you can remember. Or like the frog jumped over a moon or something like that. It's just something silly. Yeah. Go ahead, Sam. Password managers are a good idea. I think in the past they have been hacked themselves. But having said that, it's a lot easier than trying to remember or keeping a spreadsheet or whatever means you have about, unless you got a piece of paper. That's ironically probably the best, right? A piece of paper they can't get to electronically, so it's going to be very hard to do. So,
Bryce, speaking of warranties and best practices, could you briefly address uninterruptible power supplies? And secondly, the issue we talked about before, could you touch on authentic communication so people know how to differentiate between email that's a phishing attempt and or the spate of attempted duplication of Rotary members' Facebook accounts?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of stuff piled in that, Mike. If I missed something, please let me know. Start from the end. So I still have the problem with the dual Facebook accounts. I have an old account that I can't reset the password for, so I'm not sure how to get around that. But I've got that issue. From a standpoint of what else did he ask? UPS. Well, UPS, I think you don't think that a UPS, which is just basically a way to power your workstations, right? It's like a smart charger with lots of plugs. That's how some major companies have been hacked. I believe it was Target many years ago that hacked through their air conditioning unit. And it wasn't their air conditioning unit physically that got hacked. It was a vendor management system that was using this contract that was allowed to be hacked. And so the bad guys got from there, and then it was bridged to the real network of Target. And so then they jumped over. So the whole key is isolation again. Isolate your network. So you're not, like, let's say you have a guest network. A guest network can be hacked. And it can get into your network from there if it's connected. So make sure those things are separate and segregated and isolated in order to help. And I forgot what Mike's first question was. But phishing. So phishing is a challenge. And one of the things is to go, before you click on a link, to hover over it. That's pretty much common knowledge now. You hover over the link and see what it pops up. And that link, let's say it's an email you think it's from Bank of America. Well, better say www.BofA, or whatever Bank of America's real email is, at the front of that. If it's anything else, you know that's not a legitimate email. And that's one way to term. Remember that the bad guys can copy a logo, anybody's logo, very easily. So don't be fooled by a logo, because those aren't legit. Look for the web address, and that at least will help you, give you an indication of whether or not that's a problem. There also are a number of software programs that can help prevent you from receiving these phishing emails. That's what I use for my business and that for my customers, because once the email lands in someone's inbox, right, the danger is there to click on it and open the link. But if it never gets there because it got sorted out, then that helps to prevent that from happening a little bit.
I'm sure that a lot of those phishing style emails will come at odd hours, like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, things like that.
They do, Brianna, and it used to be you could tell they had like misspellings or bad English, right? But they don't do that anymore, right? Now it's like, well, the more recent ones is like an Amazon delivery, right? And or clicking on a PDF file, right? So anyone who's in HR right now, they're at risk because you're clicking on these PDFs to see if it's a resume that your person you might want to hire. And PDFs now aren't safe anymore, or they cannot be safe. So it's a difficult question. Timing is difficult. I wouldn't say they all come in different hours. If they are, they're probably coming from a foreign country and they're not looking at the time, but they can come during regular hours too, just as easily. So my best advice is trust no one, right? Trust no one and don't trust any email you get. It sounds terrible, but it's kind of morbid. Yeah, even if it comes from Bellevue Rotary. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm thinking like when you go to a jail, you've got a sally port that you have to go through, and then you get to the other side. Is there any way to have emails come into some kind of a box that would allow you to check to see that it is authentic before it ever got into your system?
Yeah, there is. I mean, you can label almost everything as spam and it'll go into your spam function. Or like I said, you can buy certain software that will actually do the filtering according to how you want to see it happen. That's more of a business than a personal, but those are some of the ways to kind of do that encapsulation that you're talking about to better allow you to filter what comes in ahead of time. But you have to kind of define what those filters are and make sure that you aren't missing emails from people that you wanted to actually get things from. So that's the challenge. Anything else?
One more, Bryce.
Yeah.
So every year I do a PCI compliance reader certification, but is there a program out there that's free for individuals to do so that they can learn how to do their best to not get hacked? That's not business and costly.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I know that there's one called Have I Been Pawned with no A, and that will tell you whether or not your individual emails have been hacked and published on the dark web. I don't think that works for the major emails like Gmail. It maybe does now. I haven't tried it in a while. But Have I Been PWNED.com, I believe. But it's really, I don't have a solution for you from an individual personal standpoint, unfortunately. There's some things I could recommend, but they're, I guess, more business oriented, unfortunately. Yes, Stan.
Some browsers, like Firefox, will take and check all your email addresses on a regular basis if you check the box to turn it on. And it will send you a notice that your email address is on the dark web.
That's interesting. Very good. Yeah, from a browser standpoint, I recommend Firefox over Chrome and others. I think Firefox is a little more protective than others. So if you guys are using that, and it's not like an order of magnitude better, but it might be make a difference. One of my, I've got a team of penetration testers, and one of my senior pen testers loves Firefox because it's fast and it's more protective, or you can filter things out better that same way, Stan. So, yes. So Defender is good. The problem with Microsoft's products is not their quality. The problem is that the bad guys, if they get into Windows, they get into anything, like millions and millions of computers. So they've always got this huge target in their back. Now, Defender is good if you can get into the enterprise level. So you're not just at like an E1 level, like goes from E1 to E5. E5, you're great. I think E4 is probably okay, and probably even E3 is all right. But if you're less than that, the qualification of Defender that you get isn't quite substantive enough. I do like some other endpoint protection above and beyond Microsoft's piece, but I'll still use them to scan. I think this whole piece about scanning is kind of overrated, that scanning a device doesn't make it clean. It just compares you against a database of existing viruses. What if something's new or it's exhibiting a new behavior, right? That's where some of the endpoint protection today will come up and look at the behavior of the virus as opposed to comparing it against known databases of what's bad. So That's why I prefer the next generation endpoint protection.
All right, Bryce, before you leave, you are the first actual speaker who will get our new speaker gift as a token of our appreciation for your comments. And of course, we will make a donation in your honor to Harvest Against Hunger as well, 1,500 pounds of fresh food, as you know, to local food banks. So thank you for your comments today, Bryce. Thanks very much for filling in today.